I sued my boss because he fired me for wanting to attend a concert. Good afternoon everybody that stumbled on this post. First up, some backstory. During my gap year between studies I decided to work for Company N was run by a husband, Dave, and wife, Karen, with their son and basically treated their staff like a small family. All was well for about 2 months, until I realized I had to ask for a day off since I wanted to attend the last Slayer concert the band would give in my country. There was about a month to go, so I sent an email asking for the day off and explaining why. This is where everything started to go downhill. I got a reply from the Karen and her reply was, "Weird." She stated that's not how asking for a day off works. I was confused to say the least. Not sure what to do. I thought she wanted a more formal way of asking, so I wrote a formal email asking for the day off. She shot an email back. I really had to think it through what I was doing, which made even less sense to me. But I was hopeful since I never really got a specific no. The next workday rolls around. I arrived, lock up my bike and headed inside ready for work. I immediately started looking for Dave to ask for answers. Before I could even open my mouth he asked me, "Do you still want to go to that concert?" I didn't expect him to ask this so quickly. Answered, "Yes." The only thing he said back was, "Okay, take off your vest and you can go home." I was stunned, and while the words started to sink in I looked at my colleagues which were just preparing for opening. When it finally sank in, anger flowed in. I am not a confrontal person, so I simply took off my vest and gave it to Dave. Without a word I left and started biking home. When I got back home I told my mother what happened. We started sending emails for extra information and got very Karen-like emails back. After a couple emails which went basically nowhere, I looked up the laws for immediate dismissal. After reading up about it I learned that, in my country, somebody can only be immediately fired when caught stealing, frauding, the person isn't able to do the work, or refusal to do the work. I did neither of these. A day or two later I met with my attorney and began the steps to sue Company N. I told my lawyer what happened in detail and he was very confident I was in my right and she was not. So after trading even more emails between the three of us we went to small claims. I came prepared in a suit with my attorney in tow. And Karen showed up, alone. I guess she assumed she won because she thought she was in her right. The trial began and I was as professional and objective as I could be. Karen did the same. Well, for about half of the trial. When she realized evidence was piling up against her she resorted to calling me a spoiled brat among other things I don't know the English translation for. I'm safe to say that was the point the judge ruled in my favor. As per usual I had to wait a month before I got the verdict black on white in the mail, but I won. It may have taken about 6 months from the moment I was told to go home to the point those 6 months of pay were transferred to my bank account. But it was 100% worth it. In the end I went to the concert. It was the most awesome and most profitable concert I have ever been to in my life. TLDR. Got fired without valid reason and sued the company for it. And I won. Laughing face. If there are any grammar errors, I'm terribly sorry. English isn't my first language. Smiley face. Next story. You robbed the wrong guy. I stumbled upon this sub about a week ago, and have since been thoroughly enjoying myself reading the stories. I figure I'll share mine. Just a quick history to set the stage. At a younger age I moved from Chicago to Baltimore to take a job with the federal government. When I started, I hit it off with a couple guys, who've since become my best friends. We all lived together for about 5 years until one by one we started moving on, getting married, etc. One guy, we'll call him John, left our place of employment to take a job as a Secret Service agent. As everyone went their separate ways, I thought I'd make a smart decision as a young professional and buy a house, in 2007, right before the financial collapse. Needless to say, immediately after buying I was upside down big time and struggling. I had some other co-workers move in, but they only lasted about a year before abruptly moving out, leaving me scrambling to find a roommate, and thus setting the stage for my revenge story. I ended up posting on a bunch of venues to find a new roommate. One guy ended up far and above the best option, we'll call him Russell. Russell was a military vet, who had served a couple tours downrange, and was now a sous chef at a local restaurant. He was easy to get along with, so I pulled the trigger in haste without doing the proper checks I should have, primarily due to being in a desperate financial situation. The first sign something was off was when Russell moved in. He came with just a couple boxes and a TV, no bed, furniture, etc. The next clue came from me chatting him up about his time in the military. On the surface he could talk the talk, but as I got more nuanced, his answers became more, well, wrong. He claimed to be a former Ranger, so he would have known the topics discussed. The final clue was the classic one: he started making excuses for rent payment on month 2. By this time I knew something was not right, so I politely told Russell to move out, which he did immediately. Once gone, I went to Home Depot to buy new locks, and much to my surprise my debit card didn't work. Come to find out, Russell had stolen a checkbook and cleaned me out. Every cent I had in my account was gone. At this time I'm feeling a mixture of anger, fear of not being able to pay my mortgage, and disappointment in myself for not vetting him properly. When I ended up telling John, he was livid. He wanted every detail about the situation. Little did I know, John told all his co-workers and they immediately opened a case on Russell. For those of you who don't know, the Secret Service also deals with financial/economic crimes, albeit normally on a much larger scale than my savings account. Within a few days, Secret Service agents had tracked down and interrogated/arrested all the individuals who had cashed the fake checks on Russell's behalf. One turned and advised Russell would be at the Dick's Last Resort at the Baltimore Inner Harbor that night. John and his crew changed into plain clothes and went there to wait. Lo and behold, Russell shows up and acts like he owns the place. He started announcing that he was leaving on a deployment to Iraq, so he wanted to buy the entire bar drinks, with my money, I should add. As he was standing there paying for everyone's drinks, John stood up and screamed, "Secret Service, you're under arrest." 3 agents slammed him down, cuffed him, and pulled him out where 2 black SUVs rolled up on the boardwalk to take him away. My other friend who had gone to observe said the entire restaurant paused in stunned silence for about 30 seconds. They take Russell in, and by this time John says he's bawling his eyes out. The best part of the ordeal was John made him add in his written confession, "I routinely pretend to be an Army Ranger, but have never served." Before being taken to the city jail, Russell asked John, "Why did the Secret Service arrest me?" To which John replied, "You robbed the wrong guy." Epilogue: the bank ended up giving me all my money back very quickly under a fraud claim. I ended up attending Russell's court appearance with John, where he took a plea and spent 6 months behind bars. Needless to say, I was a bit more careful in choosing my next roommate. We've been happily married for 5 years. Edit grammar. Edit 2. In an attempt at closing the story with a creative quip, I've made it sound like I married John. For the record, my wife is not John. Edit 3. I see a lot of comments about skepticism of how Russell was federally charged. I reached out to John and he advised they charged him on the state level due to the low scale of the crime, which explains why he went to city jail, and why I attended city court. I did a quick search and found this, since I know you'll ask. 18 U.S.C. SEC 13 allows for federal agencies to charge for state offenses, which would be offenses under state law in which federal territory resides. Move on to the comment. The biggest tragedy here is that Up didn't marry John. John really is marriage material. I don't get how a 10-minute meeting one a week could be construed as micromanaging. It strikes me as the absolute bare minimum management. I'm guessing she hurled that term at you because she didn't enjoy being called out on her incompetence. I don't know, I'm not usually pro-police involvement, but she legit tried to fuck your world up. She was positioning things for the company to charge you for theft. That's scary. That's a person who needs real consequences. Not just a job change. It's nice to see she was able to put in appropriate effort into her work. It's just too bad she chose not to do so for her actual job. Someone who commits fraud like this should be held accountable. She'll do this again until she actually gets caught. This is exactly why I gave up my supervisor position. I was primed to advance. I was one of 2 candidates for a high-level supervisor position. I gave it all up for a telework position, same pay, no chance for advancement but no supervising. The level of immaturity for this young lady, her actions would have led to the Up losing her job. That has ramifications. Unfortunately, I'm married to someone that had some immaturity issues. I could post about my ProRevenge, but we're still married and I have 2 beautiful kids. Ms. Evil needs therapy, ASAP. Therapy works, 2 years in and we are still making breakthroughs. Hopefully, this has humbled Ms. Evil. Probably not. She was extremely lucky that she only got fired and that the police didn't get involved. It could have ended so much worse for her. Nice story, and glad you ended up with the upper hand. That was pretty intense sabotage on her part. I imagine this woman had BS'd and schemed her way through life up to that point with her parents, her schooling, and had developed impressive skills. But she didn't know enough to realize that won't work at a real job, where people will insist on results instead of just cutting you slack over and over. In my experience, these people don't change. They realize they have the social skills to get by and that method is easier than actually working. I once worked with a salesperson who got by for almost 2 years, and all he had to show was a trickle of local orders, plus a long, drawn-out story of the huge out-of-town client who was going to move all their business to us. He spun that tale over 18 months up until the head guy said he was going to get involved to finally close that deal. That exposed the whole lie. I really don't think the guy worked more than 1 day a week the whole time he was there, but he sure was a smooth talker. But he sure